Thank you for having me out here to your farm.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Tell me about your property, what you're growing here.
Yep, so my name's Nick Hermanson. I'm from Story City, Iowa. I'm a fifth generation farmer. My family was headed across the Midwest in 1871 on their way to Kansas. A couple girls got sick and passed away, and so my family never left. And so I'm fortunate that this is home and not western Kansas, where we would really be talking about water in a different conversation. So we raise corn and soybeans. We're standing here in a soybean field. Generally, we raise about 2/3 of our acres in corn and 1/3 in soybeans. So we'll plant two corn crops in a row and then a crop of soybeans and then go back to 2 corn crops in a row. We raise turkeys on our farm, and so we can use a lot of the corn to feed. We'll send it to a feed mill, grind it up, and bring it back and feed the turkeys. The soybeans are all grown as a seed soybean. We sell them back to a seed company to produce next year's seed as needed, and some of them go into the feed industry too if they don't need them all for seed.
Water on your land. Talk about how you use water.
Well, obviously you can't raise crops without water, so we're fortunate here where in central Iowa where it rains. We get adequate annual rainfall, about 33 inches a year on average. The last couple of years have been a little less. This year started out maybe a touch on the dry side, and then we adequately caught up in about a 3 to 4 week period back in April and May when it rained every other day. But we have really nice prairie soils here that can actually hold a lot of water. This is a little bit lighter soil that you can see. It's a little bit lighter color, a little sandier, but if we go a few miles west of here, it's really a black, heavy clay soil that can hold a lot of water. So that's very helpful for these drier periods that we have in the middle of the summertime. However, they are also detrimental in the wetter periods that we oftentimes find in the spring. As I was saying earlier, our natural rainfall patterns we're a little bit heavier March through June-ish. We dry off a little bit in the heat of the summer and then pick back up in the fall and then actually dry off a little bit in the winter. Most of the winter precipitation is all snow. And so since we have those early spring rains and trying to do field work, a lot of our soils would be very difficult to farm without any artificial drainage. So we do have a fair amount of drainage tile. Most of the stuff we've been installing in the last 10 years, we're actually trying to install it shallower. So we only get it maybe 30 inches deep, 30 to 36 inches deep. So we're draining just the top where the root zone are with the smaller plants, and then that leaves the water deeper. And so later on in the season allows those roots to get down deeper and capture that water. Because a corn or soybean plant here needs basically just as much pore space of air in the soil as it does water. So everybody thinks, oh yeah, you got to have water, but if you have too much water and air or no air, then the plants will wither and die just as well as if they don't have any water.
Sure.
So yeah, water is obviously a very necessary resource for us.
I want you to talk about conservation practices, right? These things, everything from on field to off field, edge of field, whatever it might be. What got you interested in using some of these on your property?
Kind of just natural family attitude towards conservation. We've always had something, you go back to 50 years ago and a moldboard plow was very common amongst everybody, ourselves included. But as technology kind of changed a little bit, some of my older relatives started adopting conservation practices, and then when I came back from college, we just kind of gradually increased them a little bit. Technology has probably made the biggest difference there. So this field, actually most all of our fields we use a tillage practice called strip till. So we'll go out after we harvest these soybeans. We'll come back out and we'll till just a little bit narrow strip, exactly where we're going to plant next year. We'll put any fertilizer and stuff down in that strip. And then so basically, if you look at our fields from a macro level, we have 1/3 of our field is tilled, and 2/3 is basically a no-till system. And then after we plant a row of corn, then we'll come back and we have to kind of shift over. So we do kind of spread around a little bit on there, but from a tillage standpoint, we do not till everything completely. The biggest driver on making that functional or feasible was RTK auto steer. We tried it a long time ago with hand-steered tractors, and it was just such a challenge to stay in a perfect straight line on top of where you needed to be. But so now we can go out, we can do tillage in the fall, put down some nutrients in the fall, come back in the spring, do a little more tillage if we need to. Sometimes we'll just go in and plant directly in it, but we can plant directly in that strip, and then your seeds are growing right where the fertility is, and we're not broadcasting it over the whole part of the field. So that's kind of the active conservation within the growing. We're also planting cover crops on about 2/3 of our acres, and we're also doing that kind of in a strip scenario. One of the biggest challenges with cover crops is not getting them to interfere with your cash crop that you've got to come back and plant in the end. And so we're not planting cover crops over the entire field. What we're doing is planting the cover crops and leaving a little bit of a gap that we can come back in and plant in. So we can effectively, the cover crop we use the most is called cereal rye. It's a very hardy, very easy to grow, will establish just about any conditions. However, it very much is interfering with corn. So if you plant corn right behind a cover crop of cereal rye, you're normally going to find some sort of yield loss. But if we plant the cereal rye in a little bit of a row and then we plant the corn right beside it, it allows us to do both without that yield hit.
And that cover crop, that rye, when it's done, it's just done. It's out of there. There's no real value.
Yep. This field was planted with cover crops last fall, and we came back in and we planted the soybeans this spring. And then after the soybeans were growing a little bit, then we came in with a sprayer and chemically terminated the cover crop. And so all of that plant mass is still out in the field, just there to feed the biology, let it break down. It stores some nutrients. So there's some...
does have a little value that way.
So there's some nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium that's built up in that cover crop that is not going to leach away and wash away because it's in a physical form. And then as time over the summer, that'll break down and feed the plants that are growing right now.
Yeah. Any other conservation measures, practices you do?
So we do have a couple tile drainage recycling fields that we've been messing around with, as we were mentioned earlier. They're kind of a new science, I guess you could say, that we're not mass producing them at the moment because, one, they're incredibly expensive. They don't work in every exact landscape and field, but where they do work, they work well. So we're kind of playing around with that a little bit. I got a field that I'd really like to put a bioreactor in this fall. And we got buffer strips along the fields that we farm that are along any sort of waterway. We have like a 60-foot wide buffer strip in there, and that's been there
60 feet.
Yeah,
okay.
That's been there for probably 25 years. Most of those acres are in a conservation reserve program through the NRCS.
Tell me, can you just explain how a buffer strip works?
So basically, rather than trying to do tillage or disturb the soil or plant or fertilize anything right up next to the edge of the water, we got just a strip of grass that's planted that is just a perennial grass that stays there. It takes a little bit of maintenance. We got to maintain the weeds, and it'll actually grow up with trees if you don't do anything to it. Just to keep all that stuff away from either the soil eroding into the water or the nutrients running off into the water.
Yeah. So as a farmer, this is about your livelihood, right? You have X amount of land.
Yep.
You've got to grow your cash crops to make things work for you.
Yeah.
When it comes to putting in conservation practices, that has to work financially too. Could you talk about that?
Well, the conservation practices have to be sustainable, and not just from like a sustainability aspect that everybody likes to talk to, but from a financial sustainability aspect. Because if I'm going to put an extra $20 to $30 to $40 an acre out every year, well, there's years that grain prices are high, and that's not a problem. As we're seeing this summer, grain prices are dropping. We're not sure what the next few years are going to be, and so if it's not a sustainable, economical model, that's the first thing that's going to be cut. There's no doubt about it. And so that's why the Soil and Waters Outcome Fund has helped us. One, it covers variable expenses on buying our seed or some chemicals and stuff we need, but then we're also able to use some of that money to invest in equipment that allows us to do this more efficiently with less labor. It means it's easier to get it done. And so we can use that to make it more economical in the long term.
How long have you been part of that program?
Since its inception, I would...
About 5 years, 4 or 5 years then?
Yeah.
And so, it's market-based, and they pay you to put in Which practices?
Basically the strip till
Okay.
on some acres, and then the cover crops.
Okay.
And some nitrogen management.
Yeah.
They're kind of the three big things.
And would you have a challenge getting that funding from NRCS or from other sources?
I would say the Outcomes Fund makes it significantly easier.
How so?
Because it's kind of a one-stop shop. You give them your information, and they'll give you, a balance of, well, this is what we'll pay for this, and they have excellent staff that really does a lot of the legwork for you. When you start, it's been interesting to watch it all evolve. Where the first year, they had kind of some paper printed forms, and I'm like, no, I'm putting this on a spreadsheet because it's going to take me 7 hours to fill this out. And now it's all on a web-based thing, and they also have staff members that will, sit down with the growers and go through everything and just make sure that they don't have any questions or even fill it out for them. So yeah, there are various sources of funding that could probably be complementary. I don't have a clue on values, but the Outcomes Fund is definitely a one-stop shop where you give them the information, they give you what it's worth in the marketplace, and you move on.
Yeah, and I understand that it has grown significantly. They've got like 1 million acres now participating, 25 states. That's got to be a lot of 25 states. That's got to be a lot of farmers. So that probably speaks to that ease.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that financial piece.
Yeah, when it was first started, I think it was about 3 watersheds within the state of Iowa. And it wasn't even the entire state; it was just a few select watersheds. And that's when Adam reached out to me, knew I was in one of them, and we sat down and worked it out. And so, I would say that definitely adds to that. And
what's the mentality among your fellow farmers out here about conservation practices and the financial piece and the ease of doing it all?
It is changing. There's in every business, there's all types of attitudes and mindsets. There's people that are just going to continue to do what they do until they're retired or move on. There's younger people that are like, no, we can do better. For me, it's honestly somewhat about the challenge or the. It's always fun to do something new, and I would just get bored if I was doing the exact same thing that my grandfather did every year in, year out. So, so we're seeing lots of different changes in the farming attitudes towards conservation. There was probably a time where it was, well, if they make us do that, we'll do that. That is definitely, there's still those people out there, but they're a minority compared to what they were probably 15 years ago, 10 years ago.
And programs like Soil and Water Outcomes Fund are helping, enabling.
Yeah, because they also will, if they have growers that are like, well, I think I should maybe do that, but I don't know how. Well, you can go to them and they'll partner you up with either people that'll do the custom application for a year or two until you figure it out, or at least they have on-staff agronomists that can answer those questions of what do I do.
Yeah. I guess lastly, you're near the Skunk River, or right up against it?
It's about a mile that way.
Yeah. Could you talk just about that fact? Explain how close it is and how your farm impacts that.
Well, all of the farmland in the Midwest drains to some sort of watershed somewhere, and so we're a ways away from the Mississippi Delta, but the water that does land here will eventually end up there. And so, we're all kind of in it. And so that's one thing that I do like about the Water Outcomes Fund is the interaction between the public, municipality, and the agriculture community, that it's not, two sides pointing fingers. It's, at the end of the day, we got to figure out how to do it together.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Or in the water loop.